Hello. Hopefully you can hear me. It has been absolute downpour with hail for the past 15 minutes or so. This out of the way. Hey, Andrew, good to see you. I apologize if I lose everyone because it's just been an absolute downpour and there's even hail going on and wind and everything else. So uh, hopefully the internet and power stay with us. And of course, my computer was giving me some troubles when I first was getting the stream set up. It's always nice when it just is like, we're going to update and you just have to wait. It seems like everybody's safe. You might hear my cat yelling. He tends to do that. Especially lately. A long time since I saw weather like that. I lived in Ohio. It was almost felt like a pre-tornado hail kind of situation. Although where I'm at, I don't think they've had a tornado in 100 years. Tonight I'm working on page 22. Gotta move my water, otherwise I'll knock it over. Get my chair a little closer so I can focus better. There we go. All right. We've got the establishing shot on this panel of Professor Prawn on his little floaty chair. And he's coming up behind the correlator on the deck of the bridge here. And you can see in the establishing shot on the previous page, he's standing in front of the eyeball window. There's two of them, so he's like going back and forth. Hey, Jonathan. Yeah, that was some noisy 25 minutes or so. Jonathan doesn't live too far away, so we get similar, if not the same, weather. But I never say where we are, where exactly we are. So I think most people know I'm in New England, so it's pretty neutral. In this point, he's like correlator is punching his own hand. He's like getting himself psyched up for the battle, and then Professor Prawn, he's like telling him to have Krill Force to be ready. And then he pushes a button, and then he swims out to face Undersea Hero mano a mano, playing off the cliche. Oh, you had the same storm system go through. So the Midwest, man, had some crazy storms there when I lived in Ohio. My brother, when he was doing one of like his driving hours, and this is just one of those stories that has been told a million times in my family. There was a tornado in the cornfield, like to his left, So he had to like basically pull over in a ditch and wait for it to go past. Everybody had to do like drive a certain number of hours before they got their license. And when you're driving with an instructor or whatever. Chest would be there. Come down like this. See, this shot, it's very important that you get both of the scallop pasties. Got to get them both in there. I finished the previous page last. Coming up in a couple of weeks, I will post the official poster and stuff on my social media this weekend. I don't have time to do pre-show commissions, but I will be doing sketches for charity. I like to collect for the Greater Boston Food Bank, and I'm going to be doing that again at this show. So basically, if you throw some money in the pot into the bucket, that'll go straight to them. I will draw you a character. So there's no minimum, there's no maximum, just whatever you feel or you can give to the cause of fighting hunger in the region here. It's something I like to do. I do it collect for CGC signatures or CBCS signatures whenever I do a show. I donate all that money to a charity. It varies. Sometimes it'll be a clinic. Sometimes it'll be the Hero Initiative. Sometimes it'll be different groups that I support. And you can look back on my Facebook page. I always post the receipt for the deposit so that people can be certain that I'm not just, running away with their charity. And I drew this panel mostly on my lunch break today. Did a little bit of it last night. I don't know. I like these panels of these just goofy looking characters interacting with each other. It's just action panels are fun and all, but I also have, with this book, discovered an enjoyment for, creating interesting talking heads panels. Sometimes it was just like moving the camera unnecessarily to get through those types of pages on script sometimes for me. Because I needed to find a way to make it something I wanted to draw or a challenge. Something I'd enjoy looking at or staring at or having to draw 3 times or whatever the case may be. In some panels, I will say the correlator looks older than in other panels. I think it's just the overall facial expressions where I have like some scrunched up parts of his face. in some and not in others. Just gotta keep plowing away. Where's my light source on this? It's forward. Light source is forward. So it'll be basically like down straight on almost. Andrew, you're planning on sending me Conan the Barbarian to get graded. How can I get that proved? Um, the only grading service that I do any direct work with is CBCS. I do not work directly with CGC. I don't have an account with them. I don't have a rep that I can reach out to or anything. So if you want CGC, I can't help you with that. It would have to be at a convention or something. But I'm honestly not doing very many shows this year because I'm trying to get this book done. I'm trying to really just establish my self-publishing and creator-owned stuff this year. Um, there's been mention of some new covers and stuff, but nothing's come through yet, so we'll see. I mean, ideally, I would get to do like a short story in Savage Sword or something, because like that's the I'm much better at sequentials than covers. So, but I mean, heck, did you see that nice compliment on the page I posted from Matt Smith? I mean, that guy's an unbelievable artist. Like, if you don't know Matt's work in like folklore and Hellboy and his creator on Barbarian Lord, you like really gotta hit it up. I'm missing. Yeah, sorry, Andrew. I've just never worked with CGC on anything. Hey, Dennis. It's all right. The rain and the crazy hail that was happening here just backed off, so I'm happy for that. Um, I know that the some of the comic stores might do it, but I have no idea. I'm sorry. I have no idea how to facilitate that for you. If it's CGC that you're looking for. Did you guys hear that? You hear the thunder? Yeah, Dennis, I'll be seeing you again in just a couple weeks. Not even like in a week. It's not this weekend. It's the following weekend is the Fall River show. Comic Palooza. So I'm pretty much using all my time to work on this book here, and I'm sharing the journey with everybody as we get pages done. And by the end of this, we're gonna do like a big super cut, like a big long video of time lapse of all the different pages we've worked on and different stuff that we've done. It's like a big project ender. Did you go to this one last year, Dennis? I've never done this show. The promoter was very kind. So I'm hopeful it's a good turnout. And my eraser. Let's go up here a little bit. Work on Professor Prawn. Professor Prawn has a little logo. It's just a little shrimp. When you draw a shrimp, just like you get in a shrimp cocktail, that's the top of the P, and then just a little wedge shape. It's Professor Prawn's little logo. And his little floaty platform has like a little handlebar. It's got to be safe. Got to be safe when you're on your little floaty evil platform. I love drawing Professor Prawn. He's just such a weird. It's a weird design. I don't know what made me come up with his particular arrangement, but I don't know. I get a lot of enjoyment out of drawing the weird little guy. Little shrimp with a lab coat on. I don't know. And he's got the big hair, big Einstein hair. And then like the propulsion for the platform is like the old Jetsons cartoons where they're like interlocking circles. So you see him like he came up from over here. And then like this part, I wasn't sure exactly because there's a huge speech bubble. Like, has he turned around? Is this now like an arc like this where we can go? It might work. It might work nicely where you just see kind of the eye still off in the background. Got to get his antennae. Very important. And there's the one that's closer to the viewer is always drawn bigger, just exaggerated. There's our little water shorthand. And if the light source is ahead, you're probably not going to see his necklace, so that's going to be a little weird, but let's pull it this way, pull it that way. When I'm first penciling, I really like to just get the energy, and when I'm drawing well, I'm not overly focused on all the anatomy bits. I'm really getting shapes and movement and trying to get it to have really a personality. And that's where my drawing abandons a lot of conventions, is when I'm trying to get the feeling that I have in my head rather than the idea. And that's where my drawing really breaks away from a lot of just American style comic book artists. I'm trying to add subtext, and I'm trying to add, different layers to the image that I'm asking you to look at and interpret. I'm wanting to put more in it for people to look at and discover, second reading. I want that to be there. And it's not just by adding like ludicrous detail. So, like, there are different ways to do that. There's different ways to really try to bring something into it and leave breadcrumbs for bits of story, for bits of ideas, and then not having it be too intrusive on what's going on the page. That's the balancing act. And also, you just can't have it too symmetrical. If it's too symmetrical, it's boring. This last panel is tough because it's a really big, it's not the last panel, but the third panel at the top. It's a tough shot because you're getting the scale between Prawn and the Coralator, and I have absolutely misappropriated space in this layout. You see this lad is, see how small his platform is? His platform has to be like this. So if that's the case, then maybe he's bumping his nose instead of just having it clean like that. It's a little funnier. I'm sorry, Douglas. I get lost in those ideas sometimes, and that's where it gets. I get some different feelings and different confused bits. Because we're one thing that was fascinating, and maybe it's a question I can ask you. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I was on a panel with Joe St. Pierre and Craig Russo, and we were talking about what we were um, what we would see in our mind um, when we started a page or a drawing. And I was fascinated to hear these guys' answers, and it was so different than what I expected. Joe St. Pierre has told the crowd that day that he has like an exact idea of what he wants, and he's chasing that image. And if he doesn't hit that image, that's where his frustration stems from. And Craig said he doesn't have an image at all, that it's entirely just sort of a feeling. Um, and then I find myself somewhere in between. Like, I have a storytelling idea that I want the bones to be there, but then everything else is a feeling. Hey, Kayla. Hey, Brian. Good to see you, folks. See, and this is where I messed up the spacing and the scale in the layout. I must have been just trying to get through it. Like, the little floaty platform's got to be like this. And then he's going to be like bumping into him, bumping his nose. Tonight, I don't know if I have my shapes really down. So like I'm trying to get the spacing, I'm trying to get the feeling. And what I'll do is tomorrow, after I've broken free of this thing and it's out of my mind for, the night's sleep, I can look at it again with those fresher eyes. Whoever asks for the first Professor Prawn at a convention is going to make me unbelievably happy. And this is just saying, "I, Krill Force, will be ready." And something I could hear like Conan O'Brien saying in my head. Oh, Douglas replied to that question. Let's show it off here. If it wants to pop up. Douglas says, "I don't really have an image. I sort of tell a story visually to myself as I sketch out the page layout." Yeah, nothing's set in stone. I would find the set in stone methodology just like I would want to quit because like I can't imagine the brain being able to simplify the idea down to your drawing style, but maybe it can. I don't know. With practice, like I'm sure there's practice that goes into just the visualization aspect. The thing about Professor Prawn is just the absolutely absurd positioning of his tail. And then his little floaty platform of doom. Which I admit I took from inspiration from a terrible movie where the bad guy like rides around on this hovery platform. Yeah, sure. I can't zoom in, but I can bring it closer. Here's where I was kind of breaking down from my plot on the page the main points: location and getting from A to B to C to D. And here you just have him shaking his fist, and it's just a squiggly little line basically for spacing. And just knowing that I need to leave the top third basically for the balloons. Oh, good. I'm glad people like Professor Prawn and Colonel Feathers. Colonel Feathers, I saw having the cult following, but Professor Prawn, I saw people maybe having a problem embracing. We gotta get just the edge of his mustache sticking out there. There's a weirdness to Undersea Hero that I haven't been able to do in a ton of my work. I used to do weird little short stories in college and turn them in for classes, and then they wouldn't know what to do with them. Um, they'd be like, "Well, that's nice." I did one about a guy that owned a gas station and had psychic powers, and all he did used his powers for was to like give people flat tires. Oh, thanks. I find with the long tails, you have to give them enough clearance. I'm probably gonna bump this over just a touch. I'll bring this over to about here. Um, Probably be like this, just to give it a little more breathing room for the tail. It just has to look intentional. I don't know. Like it's when people are trying to force a balloon in that doesn't fit, and they just use a long tail because they, can't think of a reasonable design around it, or they left it to the last minute, or there was a giant block of dialogue added by an editor. Not that that's ever happened to me. A giant block of not funny dialogue being just ham-fisted into a panel by a publisher. It reminds me of that scene in The Fifth Element when he's shoving his former coworkers into his refrigerator to hide from the Fifth Element and the priest. It's like, we're not going to fit in here. Sure, you will. And here, the balloons for Coralator are just here and then here. And there's plenty of clearance on both sides, and the hair will help bring you down. But there's room for the tail to not be conflicting with the hair. Um, and then here, it's just right here. There's just one medium-sized balloon here. It might go a little higher because that way the eye still is drawn down for the people that just read the balloons. I can't tell you how many people I've met that basically tell me they don't look at the artwork. Douglas says, I think my letters might be bigger than they need to be. Been working magazine size now. I'm concerned about the letters being too small to read, yet the smaller the better for the sake of fitting things in. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I do my thumbnails at print size, because even these are a little big. Um, they could probably be a little smaller. Because otherwise I mess up. One of the things I mess up badly if I don't do it at print size when I was doing smaller, like I used to do the tiny thumbnails that everybody starts out doing, and then I would have a sound effect, and then the sound effect would just be absolutely disproportionate to everything, or way too big every time. So I have to do them like here, like there's a little sound effect here, there's a little bit here. Those are things that I used to mess up. Brian says, we're laughing at your comments about unfunny dialogue because we have no idea who you might be talking about. That's correct. I did pop into the NEC for Free Comic Book Day. I didn't bring my haul with me. I've read a fair number of the books at this point. Um, I got to tell you, one of the biggest surprises in the comics for me is that I was never, ever, ever, ever a Transformers or a G.I. Joe guy. I just thought they were not my cup of tea. And I hate war comics, so like GI Joe was just a war comic that I dismissed. And Skybound has done an incredible job of making characters I don't care about interesting and like entertaining. It doesn't mean I buy every issue or that I'm like a giant huge fan at this point, but like I tell you, it was a shocker to me. So There was a free comic day issue that kind of previewed what's going on and everything. And if you can find a copy of the free one, I would recommend checking it out. Um, the Conan I read was very fun. If you like Conan, if you don't like Conan, it's very Conan. So there's your 5-second review. I thought the art was terrific. The new artist they brought in, it's not Rob De La Torre who's doing the Buscema swipes and homages, or however you want to classify it. Doug says he used to do everything he could to not have the balloon use a line of the border, but I don't know why. It's perfectly legit, and I don't even notice it in other people's work. Yeah, that was something that I really tried to learn and adopt. And I found the people that I thought that were best at it, like your Chris Wares and David Mazzucchelli. Um, Spiegelman did it quite a bit, um, because I kept finding that when I was lettering, um, or not lettering my own work, people were doing, and again, can't imagine who I'm talking about. They would put the balloon so that it interrupted another panel. Somehow it broke panel borders. They'd just drop it in. And I just said I needed to learn how to do this in a way that looked pretty good. Flash Gordon, I like the story. Um, the art is just not for me. It's well crafted. It's just not my flavor. They use a ton of digital assets, and when you start dropping in like the 3D models in the background, even if you're inking traditionally, and I don't know, I think this was basically entirely done digitally, and that's fine. Some people can do it really well. Um, the artwork just didn't. It left me cold because like you had the 3D model bits in comic digital where they're trying to make it look like a movie. Um, I could see it being very popular and a lot of people loving it. Like mainstream audience, I think that's what they're going for, and I think that they nail those marks. Love the cover. It's Dan Panosian. If he had done the inside, I'd be probably a big fan of it. But because it was not, because Dan has that wonderful, he understands comic language and that it's not supposed to be a movie. Um, but like I said, it was well executed. It was very professionally done. I'm sure they're going to work at whatever company they ever choose to work at and be very successful. So, but I thought the story was cool. I liked the setup. I liked everything about that. My favorite Flash Gordon artists outside of your original creator, I would say, are of course Al Williamson. Um, I like Gray Morrow a lot. And I like Ralph's stuff. I like Ralph Reese's. Well, he did Buck Rogers actually. My mistake. But Flash Gordon. I even liked Al McWilliams. If anybody's familiar with Gold Key back in the '70s, he was kind of one of their house guys, and he did some of the Star Trek comics. He did all kinds of stuff for Gold Key. And then he also had newspaper strip. He did X51 for a little while after Al Williamson. Um, Not happy with his face. I don't know what's going on. We're going to go back to the blue pencil and see if we can dig it out. Might be getting to that point in the evening where I'm getting tired. What time is it? It's almost 9 o'clock. I should be okay for about another. I'm usually good until about 9:15, and then I start to crash. Let's just start over. Let's just get our. And sometimes I really do need to draw more out of what you see so that the crop works. And I think that might be where I'm losing my drawing integrity. Did I read any? I haven't read the Johnny Quest one yet. That was the other one. At NEC, you're allowed to take two, and the missus was with me, and she took two that I wanted to read, other than the two I grabbed. I considered grabbing the Marvel one just because it had a preview of Uncanny X-Men in it, but I assume that one will be easy to come by on free tables for some time. That's usually it's pretty safe. You'll grab the Marvel one at some point, or someone will throw it in your bag at a store, or you know, they print so many of those things. That's one of the things I do point out to people sometimes. This is that when it came to those free comic book day Tick comics, those are actually the most printed Tick comics ever. More than Tick number one, more than, I don't know how I feel about that, but it is a statistical fact. There we go. That's a little better. It's got a little more sass. And I don't know. I think I'm alone in this, but like the one piece of hair sticking out, like I find that funny. There's definitely things I find funny that other people don't find funny. Like I was working on a joke today, and someone saw it, and they were like, "Oh, the time's wrong." And I said, "You know, they're birds; they can't tell time." Um, but because it was not as like obvious, if it was lost. To me, that's always a good fallback. Douglas, it is 100% true. I have seen the print order. And NEC told me they will not be at San Diego this year, so I will not be there this year. They don't make any announcements, so I guess the world's hearing it from me first. So Brian asked, "Would I like UH to ever be given out as a free comic book day?" Sure. There's a long road between here and there. We've got to finish this book. We probably have to successfully put this book into stores through Diamond. Um, and just to establish that we could even get on the list for Free Comic Book Day, because they don't know me as a publisher, and they're not going to set me up with their big spot. We'll probably be on a waiting list because those spots are absolutely coveted. I don't know, Doug. I mean, I've been through this twice now with them where they said they were going and then they didn't. So, you know, thankfully I was able to share a spot with you last year, and that was awesome. And I applied this year for an artist alley space. I just didn't get one. It's one of those things I'll keep applying for, and maybe someday they'll let me back in the front door. Yeah, next year I want to apply to, just a handful of the bigger ones because I'll have this book to show to people and get it out there, and that's what I'll do next year. Like I want to apply to C2E2, Baltimore Heroes. I've never done Heroes. I was supposed to do Heroes, and then COVID happened. Heck, even my name was on the poster, so I don't know if you remember, if you walk past the booth that NEC normally was last year, it was just a table selling stickers. So I guess it is what it is. I just have a couple of things that I've done for them that they still haven't published that have been sitting on the shelf for a long time. I would like to figure out a way to get those done and out. They were a lot of work. One of them was a collaboration with a writer I hadn't worked with, but they had done the tick prior. I like that line better than this one. See that line right there where it's like a little bit of a snarl where it's got like a nice. Right. I agree. Tough spot on the floor if you're at a destination. Don't really have to do a separate Undersea Hero update this episode, since this episode pretty much is like, hey, here's the page that I'm on right now. And then there was the page we just did. So I want to have a break here because I want you to know that the nose is being bumped up against. So we'll put the little pole bits right here, and then because it'll be coming back the other side, we can just have it be it in black. We don't have to have like both portions of the pole on that side. And then this little platform comes under. And then we want to show that the nose is interacting with the floaty platform. So we want to have just a shadow coming down this way, like this. But it does not there's that little bit of white there that shows a break, so it shows that there's more platform behind where the nose cast shadow is, so it comes forward a little bit. Doug says C2E2 is a high recommend. That's I've heard it for years. I haven't done a Chicago show since it was a Wizard World, and I've got friends out there, so friends I haven't seen in since before COVID, so that I would love to see. My friend Eli, who I used to work with at Altered Reality. Got to shrink that section there. See where we're at. Face, head's got to come up just a little more. There we go. It's like shaking his fist. He's like, "Yes, we will crush them." There's our little burst. And then the texture on Professor Prawn's cart is kind of like a Walt Simonson texture, where it's a stippling. Actually, I don't think that the burst is appropriate for this background. So that was a good thought, but I think if we just did a shadow, a cast shadow that splits the background, I think we would do just as well. Kind of like we did that here, where this background shadow is creating an extra layer because he's breaking it and his ponytail's breaking it. And then we see that Prawn is behind the correlator by the little trail that goes behind him, his little exhaust trail from his platform. And as you can see from these pencils, like I keep drawing with the pen, so the inking is part of the drawing process. I'm not just tracing over lines. I used to do that where I would pencil it in as tight as I could, and then I would basically be tracing over my own lines, and it would just the all the energy would just get sucked out of it. I've got to have, a full head of steam and not be trying to like that. I would have a almost a trepidation for like not wanting to mess up some sort of pencil line that I fell in love with, and that was a terrible way for me to draw. If you look at, I can look at some of my pages and know that I was not inking or drawing. I was trying to not mess up, and it's just stiff as a board. Here you can see a couple of Prawn's little extra arms under there. Got his little texture. I'm sure one of the things that's always a certainty when I do the free or almost free sketches is I get asked to draw lots of Spider-Man and then lots of characters I've never drawn before. I'll end up drawing characters from anime, and I annually I put out into the universe, and I always bring this up because it's like I don't know, it's weird. It's like I draw like the worst Sonic the Hedgehog ever, and yet every year I will have to like I'll get asked by someone, and I'll be like, "Hey, that's not my strong suit," and they'll be like, "But that's the only comic I read." And at that point, it'll just be like, "Oh well, I've got no choice. I have to draw another terrifying looking Sonic." They tend to look closer to what that movie was originally going to look like. To be honest, if that version of the movie came out, I probably would have had to have seen it. I like a good absolute disaster. But Now they've made two. They changed him, made him look like the video game, and now they've got like another billion-dollar franchise with Jim Carrey as the bad guy, whose name I can't remember. Now, see, it's going to be so full of speech balloons that I don't really want to put a ton of effort into the background there. And I don't know if having it, I don't want it to conflict here because we now have a visual line here that comes down like this. So we would need to go, we would need to bisect it in order to break it. So it would have to be something like this. Because that's the only way to stop one of those arcs visually is to bisect it. Or we can come back in with that texture. I think that'll work better. Because it's really just filler for the original, if anybody, other than me ends up with it. Let's say this is the point where they're coming to. Bring some in here. All right. And one of the recurring gags, and this is a callback to an earlier gag. If you go back to the page where he is excitedly telling his coworkers about kill force, he mispronounces krill force. So in this panel, obviously we've started with the discussion, the talk, he bumps into him. And in this panel, with just this headshot, we want to show that he's pulled away from Prawn and he's looking back. I might need to pull out a little bit. I mean, can we somehow just have even just an indication of a shoulder? And then you can see that he is looking back at Prawn. He's already turned away from him without showing his entire figure again turning and having to have that literal turn. Be a little clever and just have it show just a tiny bit. So let's try to do that. And then we show him, pushing a button just to open the jaw door. And then the last panel is, like your classic aparo, just swimming away from the camera, full figure. Jim Aparo's fluidity on his Aquaman pages is just a marvel. He came over from Charlton with a very unique drawing style and lettering style because he lettered all his own work right from the jump. And Thane of Bagarth and some other the Charlton books that he was working on, you really saw him. And The Phantom was probably the one where he came most into his own as far as superheroes go. And then once he got onto Aquaman, after the first handful of issues, just absolute gorgeous figures in three-dimensional space traveling through water. Yes. This angle's a little tougher, so I'm gonna draw in some extra guidelines to help me out. Some of these are things that I'm usually picturing in my head, but because there's a little bit of a bend to this, I want to draw them in so that I have them just as an extra bit of support for my drawing. The eyes are a little set back. The nose is actually going to go out past the cheekbone just a tiny bit. You're going to see under this part of the eye where the eye socket is. And then he's got like an exaggerated, like really unhappy. Hey Dave, thanks for popping in. I hope you're doing well too. It's definitely gotten better. I mean, the pouring rain and the hail we had earlier, but we've been pretty productive with our pencils and layouts off of our thumbnail. Working on like a nice little headshot where we're trying to get some expression, a little bit of motion. The good thing about him having like the long goofy hair is that, you know, you can use it as a directional. We could even have like a little bit of it here from his ponytail. He's turning. Let's try to build this pyramid. There's the middle, the septum there. And then we get that part. His eye is actually going to be right up on the edge there. Oh, knock on wood, we haven't lost our internet. That crazy, crazy weather. My buddy Jay and I are talking about doing a collaborative drawing on the 100th episode. Thinking about having him do the layouts and I'll do the finishes on camera. Just for something different so you can see my approach, and I'll talk you through how I interpret someone else's layouts and pencils and stuff. And Jay's pencils are very, very loose, hugely energetic, very stylized. You can see all of his influences, like all, even if you were to go over to his page, his name's Jay Kennedy, you were to look at his work, you would see underneath his finish, which is all Jay, you'd see some of the underlying Bruce Timm, and what's the name of that artist that did Thieves and Kings, that graphic novel series for years? I can't remember his name, but he was a big influence as well. I think that's the best face I've drawn tonight. Hair on the side. And you'll see I make changes on from my thumbnails all the time. If I read the dialogue and I look at the overall composition and I think it needs an audible, that's the beauty of being your own boss on, you know, one of these. It also means that if it's bad, I have to take the blame for it, which totally fine with that. After this, what am I doing after this? I am going to have a beverage and prep my lunch and stuff for tomorrow. I usually pack my lunch at night. I think I've got some leftover pasta that I can just put in a Tupperware. It's funny, he kind of looks like a Ross Andrew drawing to me in this, the way he used to draw like the gangster faces in his old comics. Not quite, maybe not as Marvel work, but like the earlier stuff. I can see it. I think it's really just the angle. I was actually writing a little bit today, um, and I actually wrote part of a story. When I was a kid, I used to like, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and all that stuff. Very, very boring, typical suburban uh, person of my personhood type of thing to be into. Um, yeah, I started writing kind of like a. I don't know if anybody's ever read the John Steinbeck version of the King Arthur's Legends. It's just of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. I read that when I was a kid, and it was the most accessible version, I would say, from a linguistic standpoint. You're not reading Mort Arthur or anything when you're 12, or at least I wasn't. Maybe you guys were, but I just draw funny pictures. But yeah, it was written kind of like with that in mind. I haven't read it in 20 years at this point, but even longer now. Geez, 20, 22 years. Read it when I was in high school. Hey, Michael. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I aim to be not too boring, but just boring enough so that if you wanted to doze off after a long day, it's totally fine. I'm not going to interrupt that. One thing I always take away from these is sometimes I'll think of a way to say something that I was trying to talk about better later, and I wonder if I should write that down or post it in the comments or something, because I'm just kind of riffing off the cuff as I'm drawing and going along. Because when I look at an artist's work, like even especially if it's an artist I'm not familiar with, I always grant them quite a bit of professional courtesy. Um, I respect that they have put in a lot of time, and may just draw differently than I do. They're accomplished professionals, so I try to give grace, especially to things that aren't necessarily, things that are my preferred look for things. It doesn't make them bad at all. Like that Flash Gordon book, I would say that was drawn very well. And it's very much of the modern general comic reading audience's tastes. So it'll probably sell gangbusters, especially the first issue. Mad Cave is putting it out, and I've heard lots of good things about people working at that company. So who knows? I realized that if from this angle you would see part of his undersea Mad Max shoulder pads that are made out of sea urchin and coral. I thought I had a design where it was actually staghorn coral on his shoulders, and I even drew the texture and like the little branches and stuff, and it just looked too good. And what I mean is it didn't make me laugh. I wanted it to be goofy looking. And in this one, to bring the motion forward some, I wanted to have a diagonal shadow forming in the background, where it creates basically a sub panel. And what I would like to do, I don't think there's room for it, but let's just take a look. Let's see if we can make it work. When I put a shadow like that, what I like to do also is put a source for that shadow. Or like, even if it's just a couple of pipes. Or one large pipe with like one of those classic little wheels, like the shut-off wheels on it. Maybe that would do it. Let's take a look. Because the shadow has to come down to his forehead. It has to come down to here in order for it to do what we want it to do. Hello, smart person. Smart person 123 over on Twitch. Yeah, I think this was my best face of the night. I'll probably go back and tweak both of those before I ink them a little bit, just to give them a little bit more character. They ask if I'm a comic book artist. I am. I am, in fact, a comic book artist. I've worked on The Tick, Ninja Turtles, a bunch of the crossovers with like Batman and Ghostbusters. And I did a Conan cover, a Power Rangers cover, Vampirella, Red Sonja, all kinds of stuff. There's a whole bunch of them on my website. There should be a link somewhere on the platform you're viewing. And then, just a little bit of that texture here. And then there's this white space here. We want to leave this all white. We want that breathing room there. And then if there is a tapering, like an intensity of tapering from these stipple marks, what it'll do is it'll actually pull the eye this way. So it'll create this feeling of motion where the eye is being directed down by a heavy shadow, framing this face. There's this nice negative shape here. And these little stipples will, after you read this, if you read it in the order it's intended, you'll read the balloon, you'll come down and you'll look at the expression, you'll see that he's kind of disgusted by having to reply to that, and then this will pull you this way. And then for the next panel, the arm is here to bring you up, but I would hope, and I've designed this bit of dialogue to be interchangeable. Um, you can read Colonel Feathers or Don't Try to Stop Me, Jan, in either order. So if you come up the arm and read this first, that's okay. If you come up to here and then come up to here and read it this way and come down, and you'll see there's also a wedge here to keep your eye going this way. This is a wedge because of the wall texture. It's like metal paneling, and that's another thing we can go in and add if we want to. If we want to add the metal paneling, but I actually think that we're so far from the wall that adding the panel lines here would create just too much visual confusion. I think it would just be too much. We're coming up on 9:30, so I think we're going to call it a night. Smart person asked, what's it like to work for DC? My one experience was pretty good. I had to work at the same time for both DC and IDW since it was a crossover. I had to follow the style guide of the Bruce Timm Batman and the Animated Adventures Ninja Turtles on the same piece and try to blend them together. You can take a look at the results. It's on my website, just encnichols.com. There's a cover gallery in there, and I'm sure you'll find it. It's towards the top. It's not at the very top, but thanks everybody for coming along. We'll keep churning away at Undersea Hero as he yells into his little seashell microphone. God, it's so corny. I love it. This is Undersea Hero, and I hope to see you next Wednesday. I hope everyone has a beautiful week, lovely weekend, and thanks again, everybody. Good night.